Hi, thanks so much for tuning in to Mom Boss Chronicles. My name is Jen.
This is Sue.
And this is Danielle.
We are three moms that work together in real estate and are good friends, and here to talk to you about fun topics, the good, the bad, the ugly of mom struggles, real estate, and other fun stuff. So make sure to subscribe to listen to more. Welcome back, everyone, to Mom Boss Chronicles. Today we have a really special guest. We have my good friend, Sam.
Sam is here.
Finally.
Yes.
All I wanted.
We're making Sam's radio. We're not on the radio, but her dreams come true.
This is just as good.
Dreams
This is just as good.
I'm so excited to have you here today because Sam is going to talk to us today about being a blended family. She is a stepmom, 2 kids, and has 2 kids also of her own. So
Yes.
a family of 4 children.
Yes.
With her
I
husband.
actually call it 2 plus 2. Like if people ask, they're like, "How many kids?" I'm like, "I have 2 plus 2."
I love
because
that.
I like that.
It's. I would consider saying 4, and there's times where I say 4, but then at my age, someone's like, "You have 4 kids and you're 34." You know, at this
Say
point,
how
like,
old the oldest
and
is,
then what exactly? So I have a 2 plus 2. I have a 24-year-old stepdaughter, a 21-year-old stepson, a 3-year-old daughter, and a 1-year-old daughter.
Yeah.
I love
So it's a lot of big age gap.
Yeah.
I figured maybe I'll tell you a little bit about myself and kind of like my background
Totally.
before I became a stepmom,
Yeah.
and kind of maybe that's what brought me to being a stepmom, or like almost it being a little easier for me to become that.
just
how you embraced it.
Yeah. Interestingly enough, I did not have any blended families within my immediate family. I had my parents were together until my dad passed. My grandparents were together until one had
I hadn't
passed.
seen that example of blended families.
Yeah, and I have 3 siblings. All are currently with their significant other from marriage. So it was not something that I had been part of, but it is a lot more common nowadays.
I was going to say that. I mean, when we were growing up, you didn't. None of my friends really had
Yeah, I'm trying to
blended
think.
families, right?
Yeah.
Now it's
too
just
off,
the
but
norm.
it wasn't many.
Yeah, and it wasn't odd if someone did.
Yeah.
It just was not as common.
Right.
Whereas now it's almost like, 3 out of the 4 of us have somewhat something
Right.
like
Yeah.
that.
I'm
so
also
it is.
in a blended
Yeah.
family, so.
Yeah. So I thought that was an interesting thing because I didn't come from that. So that wasn't something, this is easier for me to understand. But I always loved kids. I was a babysitter forever. Like that was my only job. I also did Big Brothers Big Sisters. And that I started in 2012.
How old
and
were
I
you then when you
I
started?
was 22
Wow.
when I started.
And
yeah.
how old
So I
was
had
your
just
little?
graduated college. My little was 12.
Wow, that's awesome.
And I stayed with her until she was 18.
Wow.
I mean, we still are friends. She was at my
God.
wedding. I
I
had
love
her
that
boyfriend
so
come to my
much.
wedding. She's amazing. But it was an incredible experience for me because she was 12. She was local, which was really nice. But it established me with a young person, not like a kid where I used to babysit children. This was more
I'm
of
more
like
an older adult.
yeah, being
adolescent.
like being just like someone to lean on for comfort, for support, for as a friend, as everything. I don't know what
Mentor.
she would a mentor.
right.
Exactly
Yeah,
that.
that's
So
great. Yeah.
I think that was a big part of kind of how it maybe was a little easier again for me
Right.
to be and step into that role. But I mean, that role technically doesn't start until you get married. So that's an interesting thing too, because my husband and I met 11 years ago. We've been married for 5, and I met his kids pretty early on. However, my husband and I, when we met, it was very platonic. Like we were friends. And we were
okay.
friends for a while. I mean, I had met you shortly after as well, but we were friends. And I think that introduction as a friend was it made it so much easier.
Yeah.
Because when I did meet his kids, it was more like, oh, this is my friend Sam.
Yeah.
And it was not like, I'm going to sit you down, we're going to have dinner. Mind you, they were 11 and 13 when I met them. So they were
right.
not babies. They were
Yeah.
not adults, but they were
Impressionable time.
Yeah, those
in
could be
kids'
tough
lives.
ages.
Definitely. They were incredible. Like
great.
I really think there was some times where people would be like, you're going to have stepkids that are like 13 or 15 or something. I'm like, honestly, it was very easy.
That's awesome.
One of the big things I always loved was I felt like they were 2 more people in my life that I could like play a game with.
Yeah.
You know, like if we had dinner, we would like play games because they like to do that thing and I love doing
Yeah.
it. So, you know, maybe if it was just my husband and I, we wouldn't be doing that.
Right.
But
Yeah.
like after dinner one night, I remember we played balderdash and like just fun games. And it was just another way.
Another thing that I love, I remember you specifically telling me, I guess every other New Year's Eve you would have them.
Oh, yeah.
And she's like, I was like, what are you guys doing? She's like, we're going to play games.
Yeah.
With the kids.
Yeah.
And I loved it. Like, I love that you truly embraced that.
That was, I definitely enjoyed that because they liked being with us too. And it wasn't like every year where, I did have FOMO at times where my friends would be going out and I would stay home, but it was never that night. It was just more leading up to it. But always, like, I definitely enjoyed their company, which was helpful. Yeah. But I think that, all that background of, loving kids and being part of like children programs definitely helped me understand kids.
And not be scared to go into that relationship.
Yeah. I think one of the big things too, and I've always felt this way, was they have a mom. And I was never trying to be that person to them. Yep. And same thing with with Big Brothers Big Sisters. It was not me trying to become this mother figure to her. Yeah. It was just someone that they could lean on for support or feel loved by or, again, that positive reinforcement in life. I just think that's important to have.
Totally. Especially because obviously we have parents and sometimes your parents try to tell you something, it kind of goes over your head because, they're your parents.
Well, you don't want to hear what they're
saying.
Right.
There's somebody else you admire who's older than you who just wants to be your friend or just, give you guidance or just be the positive person. What a big impact it has.
Yeah. I think, when we're all together, the relationship as it is, I mean, again, it's changed over time. When we first had met, we were just, my husband and I at the time, just boyfriend and girlfriend, or actually at the beginning, just friends. Right. So when we'd hang out, it was like, oh, this is another friend coming over. And there was funny stories. Like one time, the first time I met my stepson, we walked around the Manasquan Reservoir, and him and his friend were on bikes, and Mike and I were jogging. And he was I guess he told me after the fact that my stepson introduced me as his dad's client. So maybe Mike had said, oh, we're going to meet my friend Sam, but he then said to his buddy, he's like, oh yeah, this is my dad's client.
Mike is in real estate. So
exactly. And again, he was not thinking it was anything other than that, just like, oh, he's like, he's a friend. Right. I know.
I mean, that's a fun client.
Personal trainer.
And so then, that was actually the first introduction with him. And then I don't even remember my first introduction with my stepdaughter because it probably wasn't so impacting that it was so memorable. Because again, it was just
not a lot of pressure.
It wasn't a lot of pressure. And I'm so glad we did it that way.
Yeah. Nice way to start off.
Yes, definitely. Because that just made the transition of continuing to be in their lives easier because it was not so much of the pressure of a label. Yeah. And then when it became the label, it was like, oh, she's already been around a lot, and we like hanging out with her too.
For?
Maybe. And again, they're younger too, so it wasn't so much of that. But forever, I've always and will always say this is just never trying to replace anyone. That was huge for me.
Not
because
overstepping boundaries.
Yeah. I mean, I always wanted to be involved. Once we started dating more, and when we started living all together, because we did live together before we got married, which was another layer to blended families.
And I will say, what I love about Mike and your blended family situation, because I've seen you guys since you've been dating to married and now kids of your own. Mike is a great dad. Yeah. And I feel like he would always put his children's needs first, right?
Definitely.
Like, you moved to where they went to school. Like, you guys, like, yes, you were, the friend and then the girlfriend, but Mike always took into account his kids.
Yeah, for sure. And I think that's another element to blended families, but specifically mine, I didn't have any of my own kids. Yeah. Also, I met my husband when I was 23, which was very young. Yeah. So I was, I didn't have so much dating experience. I had dated, but it wasn't like I had been married. I hadn't had that previous experience of children myself at all. So I think
and there's 23, you're young. So people kind of look at you like, oh, wow, you sure you want to get into this?
Definitely. I mean, that in itself, because my husband was 40, so we are 17. Carry the two. We're 17 years apart, which, I think that in itself is a little, different.
It's hard for people to grasp
Yeah,
Right. I have some funny stories about that. We'd all go out to dinner one time, and I will never forget this. The four of us would go out to dinner, and like the waitress would be like, "Are these your kids?" I'd be like, "Those are my kids. This is my girlfriend." And that really only happened once, and maybe she was just trying to hit on him or something, and she was like, who knows what she was associating me as, but that was really funny. That was definitely early on, and not that he looks older, but it was just again, I think she was just trying to hit on her or something. Yeah,
I gotta understand the scene.
Yeah. But
So funny.
I think because I didn't have kids too, I think that made the situation a little different than maybe someone who had children themselves.
Right.
Like, these are my kids, these are your kids. We're gonna blend our families together, which in itself is a really interesting type of blended dynamic, Brady Bunch almost. But we didn't have that. So I came into a family and to a relationship with someone whose children were his number one. And I always knew that forever. And I think that was one of the things, too, that maybe some people close to me just wanted to make sure I understood that.
Right.
Because that is, again, I didn't have that perspective on my end, that it was just to make sure, like, you understand that his kids are always going to come first. Like when you're, yes.
Right.
But that was why I loved him and did fall deeply in love with him, because I did see how he was as a father. And I knew that I wanted to share that experience with him as well. Yeah. And even with my stepchildren, sharing the experience of, again, not me being a parent, but me being on the sideline with him.
Being
he
part
was
of their lives. And,
certainly. And I always look at it like, our family doesn't end with 2 + 2. They're hopefully at some point they might have kids, and then I get to enjoy life with them and their children.
As like the bonus grandma.
Yeah, whatever we call it. Yeah. I mean, we joke around, they call me SMS, Stepmom Sam. And like if they write something like in cards, they've written that to me, SMS. But it's for me never been a question as to whether or not I, wanted this. I think the question from what you were saying before was of other people maybe questioning me.
Yeah.
And being younger, starting dating him when I was younger, and I look at it and I was like, 23, that's really young. And my stepdaughter's 24. So you think about it, it's like, and she's very mature, and I believe I was very mature at that time, but it is still a young age. I just graduated college. I had started to work in real estate as my career, and I think that I was learning the confidence in myself to make my own decisions. And I've always felt that, and this took some time to get to this point, of being this person where if I'm confident with my decisions, other people will respect that and also be confident in me and what decision I've made. And I think because I was younger at 24 and maybe up to 25, I wasn't maybe telling my family specifically how much I was involved in him and his kids' lives. And although I loved being that, I wasn't maybe giving them that assurance of how confident.
Which makes sense, right? You're just starting, probably testing out, do you also want this?
Yeah. Well, think about it too. I'm sure we've all been in relationships where we've broken up.
Oh, yeah.
And so when you bring someone into your family, which I had been in a 3-year relationship prior to this, obviously there was no kids at that point, with him, or he didn't have any kids, but we had broken up, and my family basically broke up with him too, and our families had met. Yeah. So when you think about now, and at the time, I remember thinking, like, if I then bring his family and children into my family and we all blend early on, what if something doesn't work out?
Scary.
And then now we're all breaking up with each other. And I had just gone through that as well. Right. So it was almost like I really needed to be sure. So I didn't really I didn't merge my immediate family with him and his immediate family until like a few years into it, which I think was the right move.
Absolutely.
In the time,
decision.
Oh, really?
At the time, it was very hard because it was like I was so engrossed with his family and children, and I felt like I was one of them. Like even as we were just dating, we were all like, we went on a ski little trip together, and we were all like enjoying each other's time. But then I was living this life with my family too, and they weren't part of that. But it really was so deep inside of me that I felt like I needed to just give it more time. But because we established it more like a friendship from the get-go with his kids, that I think helped it be what it was versus I couldn't do that with my family. Like, these are my friends.
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah.
This is my 14-year-old friend. Like, they're knowing this is my relationship, and this is like,
Yeah.
like,
I'm his
really
dad
like
that I
this
really like.
lady.
Yeah.
right. So I knew I couldn't do that the other way. But once I like really established myself a little bit more and making those decisions and kind of feeling confident with what I wanted
And
and
probably
what
your
I was looking
relationship
for.
with him, right? Like,
Yeah.
no, yes, we're going to be together. I
Yeah.
want him to be my husband.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah.
And once him and I started talking maybe more future conversations is when I felt more comfortable then bringing all of the family together. And I'm really glad because they got to meet my dad before he passed. So they do have this connection of who he is before, so obviously since my children don't have that, it's nice that my stepchildren,
Yeah.
when I talk about my dad, they can be like, that's how he was like.
Yeah.
Maybe they don't know him so well, but just
But they
at
have
least
memories.
have
Yeah.
memories of
And they
him.
can pass
Yeah.
that
Yes.
down
Yes.
to your children.
Yeah,
So,
definitely.
That's so sweet.
Yeah,
That's great.
yeah. And you're in a blended family too.
I am, yeah. So
Yeah.
when you said Brady Bunch, I laughed because that's what we've always called her.
Oh, really? Yeah.
Yeah. So
Yeah.
I have a son from a previous relationship, and my husband has two. So my stepsons are 13 and 15, and my son is 8, which is wild to think because when I met Mike, also Mike,
Yeah.
his boys were just turning 7 and 9.
Wow. So same age as Dylan.
It's
Yeah.
so wild, and my son was not even 2, so it's so different, like you're
Yes.
saying, because I mean Dylan was a baby. He doesn't even remember his life without Mike, which is interesting.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I mean his kids were young, but also not babies. So the relationship I had with them was different than what Mike had with Dylan.
Right.
Like in ways it's easier to bond with a baby and
Sure.
have that immediate connection than it is with, kids who are
Children. Yeah.
Yeah.
Have opinions. And
Impressionable
they're-
age.
you have, yes,
Yeah.
definitely.
Yeah.
But and they lived with their mother, but now my 15-year-old stepson, he lives with us.
Okay.
And him and I have always been pretty close, and sort of like you said, like a friendship. And
Yeah.
Mike sometimes will get like a little annoyed, I think, because I talk to him maybe too much like a friend sometimes, but I think it's good because he tells me things.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Like I was the first person to know he had a girlfriend
Oh, cool.
and this and that. So
Yeah.
He feels safe with you.
Oh, 1,000%. I'm
Which is
like the
so
person
awesome.
he tells things
Yeah.
to. So I think it's a good thing,
Totally.
Hope-
That's really interesting. Do
Yeah.
you ever take the role of reprimanding?
Yes, I will. He's really such a good kid.
Yeah.
I mean, he doesn't. I think about it. I'm like, gosh, what I was doing when I was 15. And he really is. He's a sweet, sweet kid. He's really good. He's, knock on wood for now,
And
stays
he
out of
opens up to
trouble.
you.
Yes, for sure. But I would, like if. Yeah, I don't know, him and my son are messing around or whatever. They're
Like when you need to.
yeah, when I need to, but he
Yeah.
really doesn't require
That's
much
awesome, yeah.
reprimanding.
Yeah.
It's more like, you keep leaving your dirty clothes on the floor, or you peed on the toilet seat again.
Next time.
You know, but it's
Of boys.
yeah.
Well, that probably was also an easier transition because you had a boy and then they
Yeah.
were boys too, so you kind of knew that how boys work a
Right.
little bit.
For sure, yeah. So with him, like he's definitely very easy to have around.
Yeah. Awesome.
And I mean, same with Dylan doesn't remember his life without them in it,
wow.
So it's
Yeah.
just
So
like
obviously he accepted the
Yeah.
fact that he was getting a
It's like
stepdad.
business as
Yeah.
usual.
yeah, and
Yeah.
they'll call each other brothers.
Awesome.
And,
I was gonna ask that.
Yeah, and then Mike and I had a daughter together, so she's just like the common thread
Aw.
between
Yeah.
everyone.
Yeah.
And I'm very like weird about like we don't say half siblings. Like
Yeah.
you're not
Yep.
a half sister.
Yeah.
Like that word's not allowed in my house. I don't do that. And I think that came from my sister. Like now that I'm thinking about this, like, oh yeah, wait, I did have sort of a blend of my sister has a different father than me and my brothers. But I forget, like, see,
You
I
don't even
forgot.
think
I
about
don't
it
even
like
think
that.
Because
about
you
it.
were
My
raised
brother-
as a unit.
My brother is my half brother.
Right,
but I don't
yeah.
look at it like
See, you
that
don't even
because
wow.
I got just as tortured as an
Yeah.
Yeah, like we're literally, I was like, I didn't know anyone who had a blended, but I literally did kind of
You
grow
were
up, but
in
I
it, yeah.
forget.
But it's because it was
just
seamless.
Yeah, my sister is my sister. That's all it was.
Yeah.
So I was like, I'm very like sensitive about that. I don't know about you, but
Yeah, I don't think the half sibling concept ever comes up, but I think,
Yeah.
of course, and I'm sure you recognize this too, and maybe you do or don't, but the step comes up where it's,
yes,
you know,
yeah,
they of course will say this is my stepmom because I'm not
for
their
sure.
mom.
1,000%,
And
right.
and I always sometimes get worried if I say stepson or stepdaughter because I don't want them to feel like they're not mine.
Yeah.
But on the other hand, I don't want to overstep. But I don't want to.
As I bet you, like, because over the years, that term step, mom, stepdad has had such a negative stigma.
Yeah, 1,000. Yeah, like
Like,
evil stepmother. Yeah.
Unfortunately, a lot of people have had to experience, evil partners, for their parents in their lives. But it's like, it doesn't have to be that way.
No.
Yeah.
For sure. Yeah. It's, I mean, that's,
it's like that's the reality.
Right.
You technically are, if we're gonna do technical. But I agree with what you're saying. Like, you're skirting a line, right? It's like, well, I don't want to offend you, but I don't want you to think I don't care enough about you.
Because again, when I look at my family unit, just like how you both had, like it was a unit. We are a unit, and that's how I look at us. Like. You know,
family photos.
Family photos. Like my engagement phodos, they were there in our pictures. Yeah. Like we had pictures of us, then we had pictures with them.
Right. Yeah.
I only had in my family wedding, in my wedding was family walking down the aisle, and I really only had, my stepdaughter, my stepson. He was my husband's best man. Yeah. Like we're, that unit, and I look at us forever like that. And now with the extra two, it's even more of this dynamic of a unit because the way I found I was with them of being this friend, a confidant, not a mom. They didn't need that. They already had that. I was just someone that they could lean on and feel loved by and be celebrated for. That they're basically doing that to my kids.
Is that so cool to see them as
it's
the older
so
sibling?
cool. Yeah. And they're being like siblings. Like my stepson will be a typical older brother to my 3-year-old. Yeah. And it's hysterical. I didn't grow up with an older brother, but he is like the epitome of what it's like.
It builds character.
Yeah.
I will tell you, it builds character.
I mean, he's 17 years older than her, which is the age difference between my husband and I, which is the funny thing too. But like, and they could, if my stepdaughter went out with my 1-year-old, like it could look like her daughter because even my 3-year-old because they look exactly like both beautiful girls but like look exactly like that. They have the same mouth and
they look
so
like
they
their dad,
so I always thought that was funny, like if she walked around she could look like that, and I never cared about that. I'm like, you can take them if you want. I loved being younger and like taking my nephew out and people thinking I was like 23 years old and I was like fit and like I was like people would be like, how did you have a baby? I'm like, whatever.
Same thing. I was a daddy when I was 19.
Yeah.
And I'd be like,
I loved making people think. Yeah. Like I used to get a pretend ring and put it on my
Stop it. For real?
Like nothing like a real engagement ring, but like any ring that I had, I'd put it there because I just like wanted people to think I was like married with children. Like literally at 22 years old. I mean, as a kid, all I wanted, if someone like, when you were younger, it's like, what do you want to be when you get older? And I'm sure other women have felt this way, but I truly could tell you, I just wanted to be a mom. Yeah. And I would write that down. Thing. Yeah. So I would write it down on things like I remember. And then I got self-conscious of feeling that way about saying that was like what I wanted to be because as we got older, women started working more. And it was like, well, you don't want a job and you don't want like, even my mom started, she wasn't working when she was raising us, but then she started her career more so. And then I felt like, oh, now I have to come up with a job and I have to do something. But like that was really innately what I wanted was to like raise and love and nurture. And I feel like although I really wanted my children, I really wanted to have my own kids, but I got like this idea of what it's going to be like with these teenagers basically and seeing that. I mean, there were some difficulties because when I asked about, reprimanding, I really never took on that role. Okay. And thankfully, they really didn't need it.
That's great.
But my husband was so and is still so strong as a father, and I don't think they needed another person next to him to be this strong.
Especially teenage years, because you get very sensitive about it.
Yeah. Right. And we've gone through a lot of transitions as a unit. I mean, we dated, then I moved in with them, and then we moved as a family to another location, and then then I had a daughter, and then I had another daughter. So a lot of transitions as a unit. But throughout that all, we've still stayed as our unit and still travel together.
Transition through it,
Yeah.
And, like that's what happens when you have a strong family unit.
Yeah.
Roll with it.
Yeah.
Right.
I always say, like, I took my daughter, we took all of us to Italy last summer. And
I was living vicariously
Yeah.
through your
Thank
face.
you.
Yeah.
So I had a 4-month-old at the time.
yeah.
And
I don't know
people
how
were
you
like,
did
how did you do
Yeah.
that? Because I had 2 stepchildren that came with us. Like, if it was just Mike and I...
Then we're saying that, and they do help.
Yeah, I mean, like
amazing.
when between somebody, we had 2 strollers, and granted, they still did their own thing.
Totally.
We all had our good time, but there was a lot of moments where my at the time 2-year-olds could just go play with them, and they were playing with a
can
soccer
trust
ball,
them,
and we were all together, and I was holding the baby, or someone else wanted to hold the baby, and then I didn't have to worry about any little kids. But it was really like, because I
team
had
effort.
them,
A team,
yeah, like we're going away to Florida and we're not going with them, and I'm like, we have to really think about this because it's just us
older
right
ones.
now. I know. It's like,
What are we
are we
gonna
sure we
do?
can do this? Like, and we can, of
love
course,
that.
but it's a different type of, again,
great.
that is another way of like how much of a unit we are, because we all really rely on each other
Yeah.
for so many things.
I love that. That's
Yeah,
so sweet.
but I'm really lucky to have them in my kids' lives, because my kids will grow up with now such an extension of our family.
Yeah.
Like, one of the things was hard of like saying, okay, I think I'm done after having these 2 kids, and it really wasn't that hard of a decision, but it was more like, is my family going to be, this is my family, this is it.
You're one of 4.
I'm one of 4,
yeah.
and my husband's one of 4 too. But it was always like, it's not going to end, because again, they're going to have extensions of their family, and then our family's just going to grow and flourish.
Yep.
So it wasn't that hard to be like, oh, is this just, I'm going to have just 2 kids. It really felt like, wow, in maybe within the next 10 years, there will be
I know
more
it could be very
babies
soon,
and
right?
potentially family included, which I think is such a beautiful thing.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it's like the more
You know?
love, the more people that they have to love, and you have to love. It's
Yeah.
just a good thing.
Yeah. The funny thing too is, like, I was talking to someone who was saying that they're going to be a great aunt at a young age, and I was like, I could be a grandma. Our friend is a grandma too, and like
as a step,
as a step grandma. But like, what do you? And then, but then I recognized, like, and I thought at one time I was like, what is she going to call herself? And like, the label I've recognized as I've gotten older is so not important.
Yes.
Right?
And I have found I think it's our society in the United States, we're obsessed with labels, and I fucking hate it.
Yeah.
Like, can we just stop?
Yeah,
Right?
I know.
yeah. Like,
Yeah.
what's your, if your dad passed and your mom has a significant other, it's
Right.
like, it doesn't have to be a new grandpa
No,
or
you're
so.
right,
It could just be, this is this
Whatever.
person.
right.
Yeah.
My boyfriend.
Yeah.
Like
Right.
a significant other.
Yeah. So I think those, like, the concept of labels,
Yeah.
and maybe I think when I was meeting them again as a friend, that's what made it so easy. Like, that was our label. It wasn't, this is my
Right.
girlfriend, that's my dad's girlfriend.
Yeah.
It was just friend
Right.
for a long time.
Right.
And that made it easy.
Less pressure.
Yeah.
Introducing Michael to Paul for the first time, it was more like my friend. I was like prefacing leading up to that meeting, like, oh, I'm going out tonight with my friend Paul.
Okay.
Yeah.
So you
like-
mentioned the name, so you got
Yeah,
comfortable.
so for probably like a month or so prior to the meeting, I would mention, like, I'm going out with my friend Paul.
Your
And
special
night-
friend.
Yeah.
yeah.
And then one night I was like,
Did he question friend? No. Okay, because it was a male, so
Yeah.
I wasn't sure if he.
and like he's 4,
Yeah,
so
oh,
like,
right.
Yeah,
He's
This is Michael.
like,
Just
yeah,
chilling.
he's like,
Yeah.
where's my chicken nuggets? And then like they met, and Paul, I didn't have to tell Paul. Now, mind you, he has no children of his own. Granted, he has a lot of like cousins in his life, and and niece and a nephew, but. The dude showed up with a really epic Lego set.
Wow.
He just knew how to like grease
That's
the kid
awesome.
right away.
Yeah.
So I guess like March will probably be about a year that, Paul has been in Michael's life, and it's been like, I'm so happy for him. I mean, Michael fucks with him a lot. Like, I do think that there's some level of hazing going on.
He's testing him out.
Yeah. And like the question about like reprimanding, I mean, Michael's a good boy. Obviously he's a nut job. And I think Paul does a really good job navigating. And we talked about it in a way like where I'm like, I could use your help as having a second parental type figure in the house. That's a male.
Yeah.
Like Michael, it's not like Michael goes to his dad's on the weekend
Right.
where he's maybe getting that,
Yes.
so he's not getting that. Paul has to be the one to provide it. I'm like,
Yeah.
as long as you're along for that ride.
And Michael's 5 now, right?
Yeah.
So, and I feel like even at 5, like they test their boundaries.
Oh my God.
So,
He
yes.
spit in Paul's face the other day.
Oh my God, stop.
Like, I mean, like, not like a hug,
My
but like a
3-year-old does that.
Yeah, like,
Oh, yeah.
so, I give him a lot of credit. I think he's doing a really good job.
He is so good with it. He's so cute.
Yeah, he's awesome with
Yeah,
him. And
they're really
I'm sure
good.
Paul defaults to you, right? Like, hey.
Of course.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's always, I think, how it should be.
Yeah.
You know,
Yeah.
just like defaulting to the parents
Right.
of the children and saying, and really that's what my stepkids do with me too,
Mm-hmm.
is like, hey, she kind of did this, and like, and then I will step in
Right.
because I don't mind being the bad guy.
Yeah.
I will always
yeah.
be that
Your
person,
mom.
and exactly, inevitably I'm gonna be
Right.
the bad guy. But I always felt that way with Mike too, is that if I saw something, I would just talk to him, and then the respect coming from your parent, actually the parent, you can't replace that.
Yeah.
That's your parent who's telling you what
Right,
to do.
right.
And I never wanted them to feel like, who are you to tell me what to do? And maybe they wouldn't have felt like that, but
Yeah.
I was only 10 and 12 years older than them.
Right.
So it's
Yeah.
almost like,
It's a little
it
different.
was a little different of being that
balance.
person. Yeah. So I think what I found with them and what worked for me may not be for everyone else.
Totally.
And maybe, someone
yeah.
like Paul has to actually
Yeah,
step in
right.
and maybe at some point be that person. But fortunately for me, I didn't need to
Well,
do
I
that.
appreciate that you have the self-awareness and give a shit enough that you
Yeah.
thought about it. You thought it through like that, because I
So
do think
important.
there's a lot of step parents out there, perhaps, that are like, well, still kind of operating under this, well,
Selfish.
I'm the adult and you're the child kind of
Right.
situation. Like, you will listen to me, and
Yeah.
I am now your father's mother, or
Yeah.
Yes.
mother's whatever. That
Yeah.
they're like,
Yeah.
and that's
I
where
know
the
a
stigma
lot.
of
Yeah.
the negative
yeah.
stigma with
Yeah.
a step parent comes.
Yeah.
in.
I think in my situation, I'm sort of sensitive if Mike we have so many Mikes.
I know, right?
reprimands Dylan, which I know is silly because again, he's been in his life since he was a baby. I always joke and say he came over and never left. So he's just always been there. And obviously kids get more difficult as they get older,
Yeah.
so they tend to need more discipline, but I will say I'm just let me handle it.
Yeah.
And I don't want them to ever
Have a contentious
yeah.
relationship.
So I'd rather just be the one to handle
yeah.
it, you know?
Yeah.
But I do know that he has to be that person sometimes,
'cause-
especially because we have a daughter
Yeah.
together.
Yes.
And so it does sort of get a little messy
And you guys live
sometimes.
together, and he's
Right.
obviously at the age where he does need somebody to step in and be
Yeah.
like, that
Right.
what you did
Pushing
wasn't right.
buttons,
Yeah.
and he'll test him a bit.
Yeah.
And Mike's in his life on a daily basis.
Yes, and
It's
has
a father figure.
has always been.
Right.
But
What does
Dylan,
he call Mike?
Mike.
Okay.
Because
Yeah.
Dylan does see his dad
Yeah.
a
Yeah.
few times a
Okay.
week, so they have a relationship,
Got it.
and it's
Yeah.
so it's not like it's different. So it's not like he is looking for that replacement father.
Yeah.
So it's totally different.
It's wild. 3 different situations of
right.
family.
Different, yeah.
Right.
But I think, like you said, just being conscious of
Yeah.
how we're approaching
Yes.
this relationship.
100%.
Yeah.
That in itself, I think, is a label of being a good parent,
Yeah.
or being a good partner, whatever, that everyone's situation is different. There's no one size fits all, that's for sure.
Yeah.
So you have to do what's right for your family, but you have to put other people's thoughts and feelings and the situation,
Most definitely. And certainly, I think what has made our relationship successful, and I'm sure yours as well, is the fact that the children do come first. And that is the most important
Yes.
thing.
Right.
And I had accepted that very early on.
Right.
Maybe because I was younger and I didn't need the support of the husband and I didn't have anything else. It was just me, and I had a great circle of friends and family. But I was very much willing to accept that and happy to accept it. And even happier now because I get to share that with him, with our children, knowing that
Yeah.
our children will be his number one as well.
Right.
And so I think going into, I've seen a lot of relationships with the blended families that don't work because someone, whether it's a male or a female, steps in and tries to kind of take that person away
Right.
from children. And maybe it's the disrespect of the kids, meaning the adult to the children.
Yeah.
But that's what I think will
Because
keep
kids
it
are
healthy.
smart. I feel like they sense undertones.
Definitely.
If you come in with an
Totally.
undertone or an agenda,
And
Yeah.
kids are intuitive.
Yeah.
If you're, not a great person. They're going to pick up.
Right.
Yeah. And I'm sure if they have a good relationship enough with their parent that their parent is seeing the other person, they would say something to that parent. So I think that's what ends up happening when these don't work out that well.
Right.
But that is number one to me, is that respect of the children, respect of that other parent and their relationship with the children, and definitely the respect of their mother or their father that's there.
Right.
Yeah.
You know, that in itself just needs to be respected no matter
Which
what.
I feel like is so big also for the kids, because then it's like,
Yes.
okay, you understand and respect
Yes.
the fact that I do have another parent.
Right.
And I feel strongly that I did that, where I showed respect, and that's what helped them also respect me too, because it was never any ill will towards someone else.
Right.
Yeah.
Especially because anyone's going to be protective of their
totally.
parent, as
Oh
they
my
should be.
gosh,
Right.
of
So
course.
that was always, I played, and as I should and as I felt, just I'm here if you want to talk, and I'm just going to be that person, but I will never ever talk badly about anyone else, because that's not my place at
Yeah.
all.
Right.
Yeah.
That's great.
That's awesome. Well, thank you guys for sharing.
Thanks, Sam, for coming on.
I'm so happy to be here.
I mean, it's awesome to hear successful blended family stories.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, thank you all for listening.
Thank you.
Make
Thank
sure to
you.
like and subscribe. Have a great day.